She didn't scream. She bit down on the gag so hard it left blood on the cloth. When the sheriff walked past without even glancing, she stopped hoping anyone would. Dustwater Crossing simmered beneath the Arizona sun, every boardwalk plank too hot to stand on for long. A cracked sign over the saloon door swung lazily in the breeze. Somewhere behind its walls, a piano stumbled through a broken tune before giving up. Elias Creed rode in slow. Hat low, coat faded with salt and sun. His horse's hooves kicked up the kind of dust that never truly settled, just waited for trouble to pass through. He wasn't here for long, just a spool of wire and maybe some salt. But as he passed the town square, he saw her. She was tied to the whipping post. Not bound tight like someone dangerous. No, this was deliberate, meant to humiliate. Her arms were stretched and trembling, her knees barely holding. Skin scorched raw from hours in the heat. A gag stuffed in her mouth, soaked now with blood from where she'd bitten down to keep from crying out. Elias looked away, like everyone else had. But then her fingers twitched. Barely a motion, but not begging. Defiant. Like something in her still hadn't quit. He stopped. A few townsfolk peeked through curtains but didn't step outside. The sheriff's office was closed, its door propped open by an empty whiskey bottle. Elias turned his horse. Slow, deliberate. He dismounted, walked to her without a word. Flies buzzed lazily. She didn't flinch. The knot was crude, meant to hold, not kill. He drew the knife from his belt and with one clean pull sliced the rope across her wrists. She collapsed, but he caught her before she hit the dirt. She was light, too light. Dust and blood smeared across her skin. Her eyes fluttered, not in fear, but disbelief. He looked around. Still no one came. The ride out was slow. He tied her to the saddle horn, not to bind, but to steady. Her head leaned against the horse's neck, unconscious, but breathing. He guided them north, toward the Badlands. He knew of a place, an old survey shack tucked behind a granite ridge, far enough that Dustwater's reach would fade into dust and memory. He hadn't said a word, but the air around him shifted. The silence wasn't peace, it was choice. And choices like this, they came with a price. That night, Elias laid her on the cot in the shack. There wasn't much, just a tin stove, some jerky, and a pitcher of lukewarm rainwater. He lit the lamp, soaked a cloth, and gently wiped the grit from her face. She didn't wake, but her lips moved, barely. Maybe a name, maybe a prayer. He took off his coat, draped it over her shoulders, and sat down by the door, rifle across his lap. He didn't know who she was, didn't know why they'd tied her there like some cursed effigy, didn't know what he'd just walked into. But somewhere deep in his gut, under the ash and scar tissue, he felt it stirring again. Not pity, not duty, recognition. She was a stray, same as him. And whatever storm had brought her here, Elias Creed had just stepped right into its path. She didn't wake by morning. The fever was low but steady. Her breathing shallow, lips cracked from sun and silence. Elias knelt beside her, dipped the cloth again into the pitcher, and ran it across her brow. The room was still, save for the creak of wind tugging at the warped shutters. Outside, his horse grazed in the dry scrub behind the shack, ears flicking, alert. Inside, the air held something heavier than dust. He lit the stove, added water to the small pot, then tore a piece from the last strip of jerky and crushed it in. Broth wasn't much, but it was warm. She stirred as he brought the cup close. Her hand twitched. Her eyes flickered open, just a sliver. "No one's gonna hurt you," he said softly, voice sanded rough by years of not speaking much. "You're safe, for now." She didn't answer, but she didn't flinch either. That was something. He set the cup down, took off his hat, and leaned back against the wall. The flicker of the lantern caught the edge of her profile. High cheekbones, sunburnt skin, a faint scar across her temple. Not old, not soft. She'd seen things. So had he. His eyes drifted to her wrists. The rope burns were deep, crusted at the edges. He'd wrapped them quick last night, but now he did it properly, cutting strips from an old shirt, cleaning them with the last of the whiskey he kept for pain more than pleasure. She hissed through her teeth, barely audible. Still no words. Still fighting. When he finished, he leaned back again, arms folded. It'd been 7 years since he'd shared space with another soul. 7 years since that fire. Since he'd buried 2 crosses behind the homestead and walked away from the ashes. He didn't let the memory take hold, just the feeling of it, the weight. The girl's breathing slowed. In the quiet, Elias glanced at something near her neck. A small leather pouch, no bigger than a matchbook, hung by a frayed cord from her collar, worn smooth from age or meaning. He didn't touch it. But he noticed what was etched faintly into the leather. A hawk, wings spread wide, talons pointed toward the earth. He knew that symbol. He'd seen it once, years back, carved into a rock face near Black Mesa. A warning, the old scout had said. That's not a place you trespass without consequence. He looked at her again. This girl wasn't just Apache. She was carrying something sacred. Or dangerous, maybe both. Elias stood, crossed to the doorway, and eased it open a crack. Outside, dusk was crawling in fast. He scanned the ridgeline. No movement, no hoofprints in the dust. But still, he felt it, that tight pull behind the ribs, like something unseen had already found them. He closed the door, slid the iron latch into place, then turned back to the girl. She slept. But the rope burns, the hawk sigil, the silence in her eyes. This wasn't just some fugitive runaway. Someone had gone through a lot of trouble to tie her up in the middle of a town that didn't ask questions. And someone would come looking when they realized she was missing. He poured a fresh cup of water and set it near her hand, then sat by the door again, rifle across his knees. She hadn't spoken a word, but her presence already asked 2. Who was chasing her, and what did they think she'd seen? If you're intrigued by what lies ahead for Elias and the girl, comment 1 below. The sound of water dripping into a tin cup was what brought her back. Her eyes opened slowly, not with panic, but the cold, steady clarity of someone used to waking in unfamiliar places. A low groan escaped her throat. The movement of her body told her 2 things. She was no longer tied, and she wasn't dead. She tried to sit up. Failed. Elias was crouched by the stove, back turned. He didn't startle, didn't speak, just poured warm water into a small cup and walked it over. He knelt beside the cot, offering it without a word. Her eyes narrowed. She looked at him, then the cup, then back again. She didn't move. "It's water," he said, voice even. "Just drink it. You're dehydrated." Still nothing. "I didn't take you to kill you. I'd have left you on the post if that's what I meant to do." She blinked slowly, then reached up, wincing, to take the cup. Her fingers trembled but didn't spill. She drank, eyes never leaving his. Up close, Elias could see the damage clearer now. Sun-cracked lips, a swollen cheekbone, rope burns too deep for someone that young. "What's your name?" he asked. Silence. He waited a beat, then nodded, as if her silence had answered something anyway. "I'm Elias," he said, leaning back on his heels. "Elias Creed." She stared at him. Then, just above a whisper, she spoke. "Sahel." The word was dry as wind through dead brush. Elias nodded once, gently. "That'll do." She slept again after the water. Restless this time, her legs twitching, hands clenching the blanket like it might disappear. He stayed nearby, never too close. There was no telling what she'd been through. Late that afternoon, she tried standing. He heard the cot creak, turned just in time to catch her before she fell. "Whoa now," he said, easing her back down. "You got a fever and 2 days' worth of no food in you. Don't rush it." Sahali muttered something, too quiet for him to catch. He sat beside the cot, elbows on his knees. "You speak English?" A long pause. "Some." "That's more than most would guess." He smiled without showing teeth. "Don't worry, I ain't gonna ask you to recite the Bible." She looked down at her wrists. The bandages were fresh, wrapped neatly. She flexed her fingers, winced. "Why?" she asked. "Why what?" "You help." Elias didn't answer right away. He picked up a nearby mug, took a long sip of black coffee gone cold. "Figured you'd ask that," he said. "Thing is, I don't rightly know." She tilted her head slightly, waiting. "I saw you tied up like that and thought, hell, I've seen that look before. Back in the war, in the camps, in the mirror." He stood and stepped away, as if that confession had burned a bit coming out. "Besides," he added gruffly, "wasn't anybody else doing a damn thing." That night she ate the rabbit stew he managed to scrape together. Only a few bites, but it was something. She didn't speak much more, and neither did he. When he turned in, Elias unbuckled his gun belt, set it down beside the door where she could see it, but not within easy reach. She noticed. "You think I run?" she asked. "No," he said. "I think you've got nowhere to run to." She didn't reply, but before turning her face to the wall, she said one word, so low he almost missed it. "Thank you." Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next morning, just as the sun crested the ridge, Elias stepped outside with a pouch of tobacco, leaving her alone for the first time. A breeze stirred the warped roof boards overhead. Sahel sat up, quietly. From the inside pocket of her shirt, she pulled out a small piece of folded leather. She opened it. Inside was a thin sheet of paper, protected by a layer of dried pine resin. A map, hand-drawn, inked and red. Elias didn't see, but when she rolled the leather shut and tucked it beneath her belt, something had shifted. She was no longer just the girl tied to a post. She was someone carrying a secret worth killing for. By the time Elias returned from checking the creek, the morning had turned sharp and wind-cut, the kind of wind that made a man watch his back. Sahel was seated by the cold stove, wrapped in a blanket that swallowed her frame. Her eyes tracked him, not like a wounded girl, but like a scout, measuring. He set down the canteen. "You shouldn't be walking yet," he muttered. "I wasn't," she said, "just listening." Elias paused. "To what?" She pointed at the window. 2 riders, far ridge, maybe half an hour back. His jaw clenched. He crossed to the door, opened it a crack, scanned the hills. Nothing. But that didn't mean she was wrong. If they were tracking slow, they could have vanished behind the rock lines with no more than a blink. Elias turned to her. "You sure?" She nodded once. He didn't ask how she knew. Her people had been reading land like scripture for generations. If she said someone was out there, they were. He stepped outside, walked 50 paces out to where the dust thinned, squatted down. No fresh hoofprints. But something else caught his eye. A broken branch on a mesquite bush, half snagged with black horsehair. "Damn," he whispered. He was hauling the saddle off the hook when he heard the rustle, someone moving fast through the sagebrush. Rifle up, steady hands. A voice broke through the thicket. "Whoa, easy, Mr. Creed, it's me!" Tommy Langston stumbled out, red-faced and breathing hard. The boy couldn't have been more than 12, but he looked like he'd just outrun the devil. Elias lowered the rifle. "Tommy, what the hell are you doing all the way out here?" The boy doubled over, hands on knees. "They're coming," he gasped. "I heard it at the post office. Jed Callahan's back in town, with men. He's asking around about an Indian girl went missing. Said someone cut her down from the post." Elias's jaw locked. Tommy wiped sweat from his brow. "They ain't saying your name, but they're saying the one who did it was on a roan Jeldon, lone rider, quiet type." Elias's stomach turned cold. "That match you?" the boy asked, eyes wide. He didn't answer. Tommy looked past him, toward the shack. "Is she here?" Elias didn't nod, didn't deny it either. The boy swallowed hard. "They said if anyone's helping her, they'll hang 'em too." Back inside, Sahal sat stiff-backed, watching from the shadows. "They know," Elias said. She didn't blink. "Who's Callahan?" he asked. "Why's he after you?" Her fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. "He lied," she said. "Said I killed someone." "Did you?" She looked him dead in the eye. "No." Elias held that stare, long enough to know she was telling the truth, or believed it herself. He turned to the saddlebag, started stuffing in bullets, dried food, water flask. "We ride before dark," he said. Sahal stood, wavering slightly. "Where?" "I don't know yet, but away from here." Tommy lingered at the door. "Mr. Creed, if you go—" "You never saw us," Elias interrupted. The boy nodded, face pale. "I know. I hope you know what you're doing." Elias looked back at the girl behind him, already pulling on worn moccasins with trembling fingers and fire in her eyes. "No," he said, "but I'll do it anyway." As the sun dipped low, Elias covered their tracks with a brush of sage. The two riders were still out there. Maybe 3, maybe more. He didn't know yet. But he knew this. Whatever truth Sahali was hiding, it was worth enough for men like Jed Callahan to kill over. And if he was in all the way. Because some fights found you even when you didn't go looking. And when they did, you stood up or you stayed dead inside. The moon had just started climbing the sky when they stopped in a dried-out arroyo, shielded by jagged rocks and brittle cactus. Elias unsaddled the horses in silence. Sahale gathered brush for a small smokeless fire. She worked with practiced hands, efficient, silent. When the water began to boil, Elias passed her a tin cup with some dried beans and a strip of rabbit jerky tossed in. She took it, murmured a quiet, "Thanks." Minutes passed with only wind and the occasional call of a night bird. Then Sahale spoke. "My name's not Sahale." Elias glanced up. She didn't look at him, just stared into the cup. "It's Sahali Firewind. That's the name they tried to bury." Elias shifted on his haunches. Why would they do that? She finally looked at him, and in that flicker of firelight, he saw more than youth. He saw anger and pain. "Because I saw something I wasn't supposed to." It had happened 3 weeks ago. She'd been delivering herbs to a white doctor near Dustwater Crossing, Dr. Silas Merrick, one of the few outsiders trusted by her people. She was early, too early. As she waited outside the rear shed, she'd heard voices, loud, drunken. When she peeked in through the slats, she saw 5 men, 2 of them soldiers. One she later learned was Jed Callahan. They were laughing, tossing silver, and dragging a Lakota boy, barely 13, into the room like he was a sack of potatoes. She never heard the shot, but she saw the blood. They buried the boy behind the doctor's shed, paid Merrick to keep quiet, and when they noticed the girl outside, watching, she ran, but not fast enough. Elias didn't speak for a long time. He chewed on a stick of tobacco root, watching the embers curl. "They branded you a thief," he said at last. "Why not a killer?" "They did," she said. "In Apache, a thief of life is a killer." She pulled something from inside her shirt, a small folded paper. It was worn, stained, but still legible. A list of names. 3 soldiers, 1 deputy, Callahan and Dr. Merrick. "Why'd you keep it?" Elias asked. "To give it to the one man who might listen?" He raised a brow. "Who's that?" "Colonel Ellison," she said. Elias leaned back. "The one stationed at Fort Carter." She nodded. "He's different," she added. Respected. My uncle met him once, said he's a man of law, not fear." Elias spat. "That's a rare breed." She tucked the paper away again, near her skin. "If I can make it to Fort Carter," she said, "and live long enough to speak, I can prove everything." The fire cracked softly between them. "You believe me?" she asked, barely audible. Elias didn't answer at first. Then he met her eyes. "I don't know you," he said, "but I know what men like Callahan are capable of." She nodded. There was no offense in her expression, only understanding. "They killed that boy for sport," she whispered, "and they do worse to keep it hidden." Later that night, Elias stayed awake while she slept, back against the canyon wall, rifle across his lap. The wind had shifted. He could feel it, like the earth itself was holding its breath. He looked over at Sahal, her face soft now in sleep. Young, but not helpless. She carried the truth. But truth was heavy, and men had killed for far less. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small wooden cross from a frayed leather string, ran a thumb over the faded carving. He'd buried his past once. Maybe it was time to dig something up. They broke camp before dawn. The desert was still asleep, its breath low and cool. Elias rode with one eye on the horizon, the other on Sahal. She'd said little since last night's confession, but something in her posture had shifted. Her shoulders were straighter, her eyes more alert. She knew they were being hunted. So did Elias. They were 5 miles from Dry Hollow Pass when he saw the first sign, a single horseshoe print, half pressed into the shale, angled wrong. He pulled up the gelding, slid off without a word, knelt by the mark. Fresh, too fresh. He scanned the dry gulch below, then higher, along the ridgeline. Nothing moved, but the wind had a sour edge, like the scent of old iron. He walked back to Sahel, voice low. "We've got a shadow." She didn't ask how he knew, just nodded. "How many?" Elias mounted again. 1 for sure, maybe 2. "They're close?" "Not yet, but they're good, or we'd have heard 'em by now." By noon, they reached a narrow canyon Elias hadn't ridden in years. Sharp walls, high enough to echo. He dismounted again and studied the dust near the base of a boulder. A crushed yucca leaf, boot heel, not Apache, military issue. He stood slowly, jaw set. Sahel saw his face change. "What is it?" "We're not just being followed," he said. "We're being tracked." She frowned. "By who?" "I don't know yet, but whoever it is, he's trained." They didn't light a fire that night, ate cold jerky in silence. When the stars came out, Elias sat on a rise overlooking the small valley below. He'd looped their path 3 times, laid false trails, even scattered chili powder near a wash to throw off dogs. But still, he couldn't shake the feeling. They weren't just running from Callahan anymore. They were being funneled, guided. Back at the camp, Sahel was rolling her map tighter, pressing resin along the fold when she asked, "Could it be Corwin?" Elias turned. "Who?" "Miles Corwin," she said, slowly. "He was the sheriff who came to Merrick's the night of the boy's death. He didn't ask questions, just took the doctor's money." Elias frowned. "Merrick said later," she continued, "that Corwin had debts, big ones, the kind only Callahan could help clear." Elias exhaled sharply. "If that bastard's in it, then it's not just bounty hunters we've got to worry about." "No," she agreed, "it's the law itself." Elias stayed up late again, but this time he didn't just watch the ridgeline. He set traps, silent ones, old tricks from back when he used to scout, fish line tied to tin bells, loose stones balanced on sloped wood. He didn't sleep, just sat with his rifle and the fire's faint glow barely brushing the barrel. Around midnight, the bell rang, barely audible. Elias spun, raised the rifle. Nothing moved. He stepped out, eyes scanning, boots moving quiet across the sand. There, by the broken branch line, a single scratch on the bark. A mark, deliberate. He traced it with one calloused finger. It was the sign of a U.S. Marshal, turned upside down. Message clear. We see you. We're not coming to help. We're coming to kill. Sahel stirred when he came back. Half awake, she asked, "What is it?" He didn't answer right away, just tossed another log on the cold fire, let the sparks rise. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, guttural. "This ain't just a chase anymore," he said. "It's a damn setup." She looked at him wide-eyed. "Callahan doesn't just want you gone," Elias said. "He wants the whole trail burned." "And you?" she asked. He looked down at his boots. "I'm part of the fire now." The old mining road hadn't been used in years. Half buried in sagebrush and shale, it twisted like a snake through the foothills east of Dustwater Crossing. Elias rode slowly, one hand always near his rifle. "This the way?" Sahel asked, her voice muffled by the wind. "Yeah," Elias said. "Leads to an old tunnel. Railroad planned it back in the 50s. Never finished. Locals say it's cursed." She raised an eyebrow. "You believe in curses?" He glanced back. "No, but I believe in cover." By mid-afternoon, they reached it. A sunken ridge at the base of a dead hill, flanked by two rusted rails that vanished into a black maw. Elias dismounted first, leading the horse toward the mouth of the tunnel. Sahale followed on foot, eyes scanning the scrub. Inside, the air dropped 10 degrees, cold, damp, silent. No fire this time, no sound but their breathing. Elias set up camp behind an old stone wall that once marked the mine's storage room. Sahale sat nearby, her knees hugged tight to her chest. He handed her a piece of dried bread. "Might be stale," he said. She bit into it anyway. "Still better than army rations." He smiled, faint, the first in days. That night, while Sahale slept, Elias returned to the outer tunnel to check for tracks. He didn't find hoof prints, but he did find something else. Pinned beneath a flat rock at the tunnel's edge, a folded sheet of paper, weather-worn, meant to be found. He unfolded it. No words, just a symbol, a sheriff's badge, split in half, burned at the edges. Below it, a single line, scrawled in red charcoal. "Stop walking, or be buried with her." He returned to camp slower than before. Sahale was awake, waiting. "They know we're here," he said. She nodded. She already knew. "There's no more running, is there?" she asked. No. A long silence passed. "I keep wondering," she said, "if any of this will matter." Elias sat beside her. "You mean the names?" "I mean the truth," she whispered. "Even if we get to Fort Carter, what if it's just more silence? What if they already know, and they just don't care?" Elias looked at his hands, calloused, scarred. A lifetime of quiet work, no glory. He said, "There's one thing they can't ignore." "What?" He turned to her. "Us. Showing up. Together. Alive." She reached into her satchel, pulled out something wrapped in deerskin. "I was saving this," she said. "Didn't know if I should trust you." He raised a brow. She unwrapped it. A letter. Signed by Dr. Silas Merrick. Confession. Everything. The killing. The payoff. The names. The price for silence. "He gave this to me the night I ran," she said. "Said if anything happened to him, I should get it to Ellison." Elias read it once, then again. The handwriting was shaky. The words were blunt. This wasn't just evidence, it was a reckoning. Outside, thunder rumbled far off. Dry lightning across a black sky. A storm was coming. Elias stood, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "If they want to bury this," he said, "they'll have to bury me too." Sahal rose to her feet. "Then let's make sure they remember where." They didn't sleep that night, because tomorrow wasn't about hiding anymore. It was about riding into the storm. Fort Carter loomed in the distance like a sun-bleached fortress, its gray stone walls cracked with heat and time. What once was a proud military outpost now resembled a relic wrapped in silence, a place where justice had either retired or been bought. Elias and Sahal crouched behind a dry mesquite bush a mile out, overlooking the fort's northern perimeter. "You sure about this?" she asked, adjusting the strap on her satchel. "No," Elias muttered, checking the chamber of his Winchester. "But it beats waiting for them to find us." They tethered the horses behind a dune of wind-carved rock, covering their tracks as best they could. The air was dry as powder, the sun already lashing down hard, and not a single hawk circled overhead. Too quiet. They moved on foot, skirting cattle fences and decaying posts, staying in the shadow of gullies and ruined sheds. Elias moved with the practiced caution of a man who knew what gunfire sounded like up close. Sahal moved like a whisper on stone. As they neared the outer fence, they spotted the watchtower. Just one man, slouched but alert, a long rifle slung across his chest. "He's no rookie," Elias murmured. "Worn boots, keeps both hands close to the trigger." "That's a hired gun," Sahal replied, "not military." They waited for the rumble of a supply wagon to approach, an old trick. As the wagon rolled by, kicking up a cloud of dust and clattering iron, they sprinted low through the smoke. 40 yards, then 30 more. A collapsed wall on the western edge had left a gap big enough for a man to slip through. Elias gestured. One by one, they slid into the shadows of the fort. Inside, the smell of gun oil, old sweat, and scorched beans hit hard. The place hadn't seen real order in weeks. Crates lay scattered, cannon wheels rusted in corners, and somewhere, behind those walls, sat men who didn't wear uniforms anymore, but still carried the power of them. Elias crouched behind a barrel and pointed toward a weather-worn door. "Ellison's office, second floor, east wing." Sahal nodded, assuming he's still alive. They made their way past a pair of drunk guards nodding off near the barracks. But before they reached the hallway, "Don't move." The hammer of a rifle clicked back behind them. Elias turned slowly, hands half raised. The man who stepped out wore no insignia, just a long brown coat, a pale shirt stained with sweat, and a tin badge twisted into a crude loop. His left eye was milky white, but the other burned with cold recognition. "Name's Deputy Miles Corwin," he said, with a grin like a noose tightening. "And you two just walked into the wrong end of a barrel." Sahal's fingers hovered near her coat. "Wouldn't," Corwin warned. "This ain't your land, and I ain't your law. I'm what's left when both go missin'." Elias's voice came low. "We're here to see Colonel Ellison. We've got evidence about what Callahan did. About Merrick, about Tommy Langston." Corwin chuckled. "Oh, we know what happened. Merrick's dead. The boy ran off. And Callahan?" His grin sharpened. "He's a decorated citizen of Dustwater Crossing." He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded soot-stained page. The confession. Merrick's. "We already got your little letter," Corwin said. "Thing is, we don't need it anymore. But you're a loose end. And there ain't room for that in the New West." That was the spark. Elias lunged, not for his rifle, too slow, but for a broken plank near his boot. He swung it fast, splintering the air. Corwin staggered back, fired, missed. Sahal moved in a blur. A shoulder strike, a twist. But in the struggle, the paper caught the edge of a lantern. Fire flared. The confession turned to ash. Corwin cursed and fled down a corridor, disappearing behind iron doors. Elias grabbed Sahal's arm. "We have to go, now." "Where?" "To the one man left who might still care." Behind them, boots hit the ground. Alarms shouted. And above the courtyard, a bell began to ring. Somewhere behind that sound, Colonel Ellison waited. They found Ellison alone. The old office, once lined with military maps and regulation books, now stood in quiet disarray. Dust floated through shafts of light where shutters had rotted off their hinges. A tin coffee pot hissed on a dying stove. Behind a heavy oak desk, Colonel Nathaniel Ellison sat with his sleeves rolled up and a pistol resting beside his ledger. He looked older than Elias remembered. Eyes sunk deeper, hair thinner. But there was still steel in the way he sat. He didn't reach for the gun, not yet. "Mr. Creed," Ellison said, his voice dry as desert wind. "Never expected to see you walk through that door again." "Didn't plan on it," Elias replied. Ellison's gaze drifted to Sahal. "She Apache?" "She has a name," Elias said. "Sahal Firewind. She's the reason I'm here." A flicker of something passed through the colonel's expression. Unease, recognition, maybe even regret. Sahal spoke before he could. "I was tied to a post in your county, branded a thief, for seeing something I wasn't meant to." Ellison studied her, then turned to Elias. "And what exactly are you accusing my men of?" "I'm not accusing," Elias said. "I'm proving." He stepped forward, pulling a blood-stained scrap from his coat, one of Tommy Langston's sketches, charred around the edges but still legible. A drawing of a white man in deputy's gear, handing a satchel to Merrick under a blood-red sun. The initials J.C. burned into the corner. Tommy drew this before they came for him, before Merrick turned up dead. Ellison didn't touch the paper, but he didn't look away either. "Deputy Corwin tried to kill us not 20 minutes ago," Elias added. "And he had Merrick's confession, the same one we gave to a boy we trusted. So ask yourself, Colonel, who gave the order to silence him?" Silence settled. Only the hiss of the stove filled the room now. Ellison leaned back, folding his hands. "I'm not blind, Creed. I know the stink coming out of Dustwater. Always have. But that stink goes all the way to the State House. I send that sketch east, it vanishes before it hits a desk. You think they'll act on a confession from a dead drunk and a half-feral kid?" "You could try," Elias said. "I've tried," Ellison said sharply. "I have. And every time I lose another man I trust. This fort's half-staffed because the honest ones resigned or got buried. The rest, they play by Callahan's rules or they disappear." Sahel stepped forward now, her voice cutting through the room. "If you don't act, others will, and not with paper and ink." Ellison looked at her, not with the gaze of a commander, but of a man remembering his own daughter. Perhaps someone he'd failed once too. "You're saying there'll be war?" She shook her head. "No. I'm saying the war already started. It just hasn't reached your walls yet." Ellison stood. The desk creaked. His hand hovered over the pistol, not to draw it, but to decide what kind of man he'd be next. "You're asking me to stand alone?" he said. Elias met his eyes. "No, sir. We're already standin'. Question is, will you?" Another silence. Then Ellison opened a drawer and pulled out a wax-sealed envelope, his command authorization. "I'll give you safe passage to Dustwater, but if you're right about Callahan, it won't end there." Elias took the envelope. "It never does." As they turned to leave, Ellison called after them. "You know this might get you killed." Elias stopped at the door. glanced at Sahal. "Then we'd better make it count." The sun was dipping low when they rode back into Dustwater Crossing. Sahal wore a scarf high over her face. Elias kept his hat low. The town looked unchanged at first glance. Men shuffling out of the saloon, a dog barking somewhere near the blacksmith's, and old Mrs. Renshaw sweeping dust off a porch like it mattered. But something in the air had shifted. Eyes lingered longer. A rider passed them twice without ever stopping, and the telegraph office had been closed since noon. Elias felt it in his spine. Trouble was ahead. But so was the finish line. They tied the horses behind the old Grange Hall and entered through the alley, slipping past crates and broken shutters. Tommy Langston's satchel was still hidden where Sahal left it, beneath the trapdoor in the floorboard next to 2 cans of pickled beans. Sahal unfolded the last surviving map. The ink had bled in places, but one name was circled twice: Jedediah Callahan. The crooked path traced trade routes, land deeds, and a series of X's that marked every homestead that had burned in the past year, a pattern no honest man could explain. "We show this in front of the council?" Sahal asked. Elias stared at the map, jaw tight. "No, we go where folks have to listen." They crossed the square just as the town bell rang 7 times. Market crowd. Half the town. That was enough. Elias took the front steps of the meeting hall 2 at a time, kicked the door open, and stepped into the light. The room fell quiet. People turned: men, women, the preacher, the storekeep, even the sheriff. And sitting up front, sipping from a silver flask, was Jed Callahan. His eyes didn't flinch. He even smiled. "Well now," he drawled, "look what the cow dragged back." Elias didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "This girl," he said, nodding toward Sahale, "was tied to a post outside this town, left for dead, and y'all let it happen." A hush spread like spilled oil. She saw something powerful men didn't want her to see. A murder, a cover-up, smuggling that ran through this town and wore a badge while doing it. Callahan laughed. "You come in here with wild claims and a bandit girl?" "She's Apache," Elias said, stepping closer. "And the only reason she's standing here is because she didn't die like you planned." Gasps, murmurs. Someone in the back dropped a tin cup. Elias unfurled the map across the nearest table. "Every X on this map is a home burned. Everyone tied to men who opposed Callahan. Land that just happened to end up in his possession." He held up Ellison's signed order. "This says we get safe passage. This says someone up the chain is listening now." Callahan stood. His smile thinned. "That piece of paper don't change much, Creed." "No," Elias said, "but this does." He turned to the crowd. "Tommy Langston isn't dead. He's alive. He's been hiding since the night his mother was killed. He saw who did it. He drew it. And now he's ready to speak." A collective breath left the room. The door creaked. A small figure stepped inside, hat pulled low, trembling but upright. Callahan's hand moved for his holster, but this time so did 5 others. Sheriff Dugan, Mayor Hadley, even Reverend Cook. They rose, not as puppets of fear, but as men who remembered what justice once looked like. "We've waited long enough," said the sheriff. "This ends tonight," Elias said. And behind him, Sahale stood steady, not as a girl who'd been tied to a post, but as someone who had walked through fire and come back with truth in her hands. Jed Callahan didn't flinch. His hand lingered by his hip, a twitch away from bloodshed.
Elias saw it all, the way Callahan's eyes scanned the room, calculating which men would move, which ones would freeze, and how many seconds he needed to draw, fire, and silence the boy before anyone else could act. But this time, the room didn't tilt in his favor. Sheriff Duggan stepped forward, rifle in hand. "Don't," he warned. "Not here. Not anymore." Callahan's jaw tightened. "You forget who kept this town from falling apart?" "No," Duggan said, voice steady. "I remember exactly who set the fires." Gasps rippled from the crowd. A woman in the back dropped a basket of apples. Somewhere near the window, the preacher crossed himself. In the far corner, Tommy pulled off his hat. His hair was tangled and his cheeks hollow, but his voice, when it came, cut through the dust like a razor's edge. "I saw him," the boy said. "The night Mama died, he was there. With Deputy Corwin and Doc Merrick. They were arguing. Mama said she'd tell. He said she wouldn't get the chance." Callahan's gaze snapped to the boy. For a heartbeat, it looked like he might lunge. But another voice stopped him cold. "Sahal. No more lies." She stepped forward, eyes steady. "I buried your bullets in the dirt that night. I bled so your truth wouldn't rot with me. You branded me a thief, but I'm the one who lived." There was steel in her voice, and something older than fear in her gaze. Callahan's lips curled. "You think this changes anything? I got men loyal to me. You'll all be ash by sundown." Then came the sound no outlaw wanted to hear. Boots. Dozens, from every direction. Heavy soles striking floorboards. The scrape of rifles raised to ready. Uniforms pressed and boots dusted with red earth. Colonel Ellison stepped into the hall with a line of soldiers behind him. His expression was granite. "I heard the confession," Ellison said.
"Heard it loud and clear." He tossed a small leather pouch onto the floor, Tommy's original sketch inside, the one Elias had risked everything to protect. Enough evidence to open an inquiry in Tucson, maybe even further up the chain. "You were right, Creed," the colonel added. "It never ends, but it has to start somewhere." Callahan's bravado cracked. He looked around, hoping for support, but no one moved. No deputy, no allies, just silence. For the first time, his hand trembled. He drew. Elias moved faster. One shot rang out, just one. The room held its breath. Callahan collapsed, his pistol clattering uselessly beside him. Elias stood still, barrel smoking. He hadn't blinked. He didn't speak. The echo faded slowly, like thunder swallowed by the hills. Sahal rushed to Tommy, shielding the boy's eyes with her body as soldiers surged forward to seize the remaining loyalists. The town hall emptied in chaos, papers flying, men shouting, history breaking like a fever. But amidst the storm, something new was rising. Mrs. Renshaw stepped from the shadows and brought out water for the soldiers. Quiet strength in her hands. Mayor Hadley helped Sahal roll up the map with trembling fingers. And Sheriff Duggan stood at the door, no longer a man beneath another's thumb. Outside, under the settling dusk of dusk, Elias sat on the porch steps, hands clasped, as if the weight of the whole story had finally landed in his chest. Sahal joined him, silent. For a long moment, they didn't say a word. Then she spoke, not as a victim, but as someone who had survived more than one kind of fire. "You didn't hesitate." Elias looked toward the horizon, where the sun had just kissed the ridge. "I've hesitated all my life," he said, "but this time I knew." The wind shifted. Dustwater Crossing had changed. So had they. The morning after the gunshot, Dustwater Crossing didn't wake with the sound of chaos. It woke with something stranger. Silence. No hammering hooves. No raised voices in the square. Just the low creak of porch boards and the steady rhythm of sweeping brooms. For the first time in years, the townspeople moved without looking over their shoulders. Elias Creed sat at the edge of the dry well, nursing a chipped tin cup of coffee that tasted like ash and something sweeter. Across from him, Colonel Ellison oversaw the packing of reports and evidence, a small detachment of soldiers preparing to escort the documents to Tucson. Sahal stood nearby, talking softly to Mayor Hadley. She didn't wear a scarf anymore. "Word's already spreading," Ellison said, crouching beside Elias. "Townsfolk are telling the story themselves about the map, the fires, the boy. That's the kind of truth that takes root." Elias didn't answer right away. He watched a group of school children gather near the church. The teacher was reading to them from a book Tommy had carried in his satchel, a volume of Western poetry, water-damaged but whole. "I don't think I'm the kind of man who plants things anymore," Elias said finally. "Maybe not," the colonel replied, "but you cleared the weeds. That counts." Near the feed store, Sheriff Duggan posted a new town notice. This time the ink wasn't smeared. The words weren't lies. It read, "Effective immediately, the territory recognizes Dustwater Crossing as under federal protection pending further investigation into local corruption. Civil order will be jointly upheld by local and military authority." And beneath it, in smaller letters, someone had tacked on, "Truth survived." By midday, families who had hidden indoors were coming out again. A Lakota elder from a nearby camp rode into town with an escort of young riders. They brought dried meat, water gourds, and a carved pendant for Sahal, a mark of honor from her tribe. No one turned them away, not this time. Elias walked past the saloon where it all began. The doors still swung crooked. The same whiskey stain remained on the step. But something invisible had been lifted, maybe not erased, but released. Later that evening, he found Sahale beneath the cottonwood tree near the ridge, where the wind carried dust and blossoms in equal measure. "Are you staying?" she asked without turning. "I don't know," Elias said, "but I'm not running." She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, Dustwater Crossing exhaled. Elias didn't return to his ranch, not because he couldn't, because it no longer felt like home. Instead, he stayed in Dustwater, first on the edge of town, helping mend broken fences and burned-out sheds, then closer in, where folks had started calling him Mr. Creed with a nod of respect instead of suspicion. He never explained why he gave up the ranch. Some guessed it held too many ghosts. Others figured he just wanted to be where the boy and the girl were. They were right on both counts. Tommy Langston stayed too. Officially, he was under Mayor Hadley's care. Unofficially, he spent most afternoons shadowing Elias, learning how to saddle a mule, mend a stirrup, or tell the difference between rabbit tracks and fox. He never called Elias father. He didn't have to. They shared coffee, silence, and dry laughter. That was enough. As for Sahale, she never slept in the same place twice during those early weeks. Sometimes she stayed in the room above the apothecary, sometimes in the old stable by the creek. But wherever she went, folks left food on the doorstep, a shawl, a note. No one asked anything of her. They simply gave her room to be. One morning, she woke to find a circle of stones arranged at her door, Apache style, a silent sign of protection. Another morning, she found a wooden carving of a sun, left by Tommy. And on a warm dusk, after weeks of distance, Elias found her by the fence outside the churchyard. She was mending a wind chime, her fingers careful around the old copper pieces. He watched her work for a moment before speaking. "I'm not good at most things," he said quietly, "but I know how to stay when it matters." She looked up. Not startled, not angry, just knowing. "I used to think family meant blood," she said. "Now I think it means who carries your silence." The wind stirred the chimes. A single wavering note danced in the evening air. And just like that, the line between strangers and kin began to blur. From the outside, it didn't look like much. A broken-down rancher, a boy without a mother, and a girl who had been tied to a post. But to those who had seen what came before, it was something else entirely. A new kind of family, built not from paper or blood, but from fire and truth and the choice to stay. Days passed, then weeks. Dustwater Crossing didn't become a perfect place, but it became honest. Sahal started teaching the children, Apache and settler alike, not just how to track in dust or read river stones, but how to remember who they were before the world told them to forget. She carried her past like a song now, not a wound. Tommy planted beans behind the general store. When the first green shoot broke through the earth, he ran all the way to Elias, barefoot and breathless, holding it like a secret too precious to speak. Elias just smiled and said, "You gave it light. That's all anything really needs." Later that summer, he built a bench beneath the cottonwood tree, the same tree where Sahal once stood, alone, marked, and waiting to die. He carved 3 names into the backrest, not a family by blood, but by choice. Tommy, Sahal, Creed. A traveler passing through saw the bench and asked, "Isn't this the place where that Apache girl was strung up for stealing?" Sahal met his gaze, calm, clear. "It was," she said. Then Elias looked up. "And it's also the place where someone chose to cut her down." Have you ever seen something wrong and wondered if your voice could make a difference? Have you ever been the one no one listened to until someone finally did? Share your story in the comments. Let others hear your truth. Because sometimes stories are the only way we remind each other that we're not alone. And if this tale meant something to you, hit that subscribe button, because more true Wild West stories are coming, and every single one begins the same way, with a moment, a choice, and you.